The next question comes in from at the other Jess O'Reilly on Instagram. Her question is, when it comes to your female clients, both pro athletes and general population, do you approach anything differently due to the biological differences between men and women? To answer the question, absolutely. Okay, definitely a lot more so now as my knowledge and experience expands, and the more females that I work with, particularly high level athletes that I work with, the more that I realize how much of an impact these hormonal fluctuations have throughout the month on a month-to-month basis due to the menstrual cycle. And this was not always the case. As I learn more, as I expand my knowledge and experience, then I'm always asking more and more questions and how I can refine my skills, refine my knowledge, refine my experience, and learn, grow, develop. So, I didn't really pay too much attention to this when I was a younger trainer, but definitely now as I start learning more and more about the differences between the hormonal fluctuations. And that's the thing, I didn't really get into the differences between training men and women differently. It was more so as I started learning about gut health and I started learning about hormones and all that type of stuff that I actually went down this path and started investing a lot more time, energy, and effort into creating an understanding or creating an ideology that made sense to me. But what I have noticed is that females and males tend to be able to handle different amounts of intensity, different amounts of duration of work, volume of work, and also their ability to recover. So I'll speak a little bit more from my experience. I'm not a professional in this manner or a specialist in this topic by any means, but what I have noticed is that for the most part, females are not able to maintain as high an intensity as blokes, okay? Simply because males typically have much more testosterone, so can produce a lot more force a lot more rapidly and typically have a stronger neurological connection to be able to create high amounts of force output, okay, and to do that rapidly. So that's basically strength and power. Okay. Now, what I have noticed is that females can typically deal with a lot more density. So the volume of work that we're going to be able to do is typically much higher. And I've read a heap of articles and done some study on this. And for the most part, I believe this is linked to the difference in muscle fiber makeup between men and women. And men typically have a higher amount of fast twitch muscle fibers, meaning that these are the muscle fibers that are basically very adaptable, okay, and very good for producing force. So good for strength, speed, power, okay. But females typically have a higher ratio of slow twitch muscle fibers, which are our endurance-based fibers, okay, which is also linked to our aerobic energy system. So I find that females typically can deal with a lot more volume and a lot more density of work, and they also typically recover faster, okay, and that's likely due to these fast twitch muscle fibers being linked to the anaerobic energy system and being a lot more neurologically dominant, whereas the slow twitch muscle fibers are linked to the aerobic energy system and they're a lot more endurance dominant. So another thing to consider here is the structural makeup the difference between the structural makeup between men and women. So when women go through puberty, for example, obviously their hips widen to, facilitate the birth canal. And basically what happens here is the angle of their hips change. So they've, let's say they go through puberty at 10 years old. So for 10 years, they've learned to walk a certain way. Okay, and then all of a sudden they go through puberty, their hips widen, and the angle of their femur changes, which then has a flow-on effect up and down the chain. So this is definitely something that I see quite regularly with females, is they have these internally rotated femurs and their arches collapse, and they're lacking a little bit of strength and stability within the hips. Okay, this is obviously not for every single female that I work with, but it is quite common. So that's something that I work on a lot with my female clients, is creating stability and strength through the feet and then right up through the chain into the hips. All right, so I've listened to some really good podcasts on the hormonal differences between men and women and how the contraceptive pill can cause some massive fluctuations in these hormones, and which has a flow-on effect to all of these other systems of the body. So one of my favorite podcast episodes is Mind Pump with Jolene Brighton, and the episode I'm referring to is Beyond the Pill. That is an amazing episode which gave me a lot of insight into, what females had to deal with when they're taking the contraceptive pill. And they've done another episode with her. I can't remember what it's called, but if you just go on to the Mind Pump podcast and you type in Dr. Jolene Brighton, you'll have a couple of episodes come up there that I highly recommend. And, I got a lot of benefit from those episodes. And I've actually sent those to some of my female friends, my female clients, and I've sent them to a couple of my male mates as well, just to give them a little bit of an understanding of, what females are going through. It was very interesting, actually, when I was in Byron Bay at the start of this year. I was down there for my yoga course, and I was on this yoga course with a heap of veterans. There was 10 veterans there that the Australian government had provided a partial grant for to get us qualified to teach a certain style of yoga so we could take back to our network and, teach people how to deal with their mind and use it as an alternate therapy for dealing with, anxiety, PTSD, depression, etc. But we were learning about the menstrual cycle in one of the modules, and one of the boys was like, what the fuck are we learning about this stuff for? Like, this is irrelevant, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, hang on a second, mate. Think about what happens when guys take their own lives. Like, what's the catalyst for this? For the most part, it's guys losing their jobs. It's guys that fucking lose their misses. It's guys that lose their kids. It's something big that's happened in their life that, makes them not want to be there and want to punch out of life early. So if you can understand what phase of the menstrual cycle your partner is in, then it's going to give you a much better idea of when you can communicate certain things and when you should be, trying to resolve conflict and things like that. And, it'll just give you a much better understanding of how to deal with your partner. All right. And this can literally save relationships. So I think this is important for not only females to understand, but also for blokes to understand as well. Now, for the blokes listening, consider this, okay? These hormone fluctuations are going to create havoc. They're going to wreak havoc on, everything. So there's going to be certain times of the month when your partner wants to be intimate. Her sex drive's high. There's going to be certain times in the month when the sex drive's low. There's going to be certain times in the month where, they're going to be dealing with pain and cramps and things like that, which affects sleep, which then leave them in a bad mood or, very irritable. They're going to be having cravings. There's so many hormonal fluctuations that literally affect everything. Mood, libido, attitude, energy levels, ability to perform, recover, etc., etc. So having an understanding of these different fluctuations and knowing when, it might be a good time to maybe not talk about something that causes problems, that is a conflict, okay, because your partner's irritable and she's just going to be fucking annoyed at you. There's no point bringing something up then. You might be better off waiting for, a different time in the month when her hormones have balanced out a little bit and, it's going to be much easier to be able to communicate at that time of the month. So both important for males and for females. And what I'd recommend doing is if you're a female and you haven't tracked your menstrual cycle, just track your menstrual cycle, see where you're at, see what's happening with your energy levels, see how you're sleeping, see how you're performing, see where those cravings are at certain times of the month, etc. Okay, track for a month, or a couple of months, see where you're at, and then as I do with all progress tracking, okay, then slowly make some adjustments. Slowly make adjustments to your lifestyle. Slowly make adjustments to, how you're eating at certain times of the month. Slowly make adjustments to how you're training, how you're recovering. Certain times of the month you might need a little bit more sleep. Other times of the month you can push your training a little bit harder. So keeping track of these things and these hormonal fluctuations is very important, but nobody's going to do that for you. You need to do it yourself.